Captain David Stone stared at the mission briefing on his screen and frowned. The order seemed impossible, maybe even insane. His ship, the Terra Nova, was being sent to investigate something called VZ7, one of the mysterious void zones that had kept the galaxy divided for over 3,000 years. Stone had heard the stories, of course. Every spacer knew about the void zones. They were regions of space where ships went in and never came out, where the laws of physics seemed to break down completely, where reality itself became unstable and dangerous. No one went near them anymore. Not after what happened to the early explorers. The Altarians had been the first to try. Back when they were still expanding their empire across the stars, they had sent their most advanced ships into the nearest void zone, confident that their superior technology could handle whatever they found. 3 entire fleets had vanished without a trace. The Altarians had declared the zones off-limits and turned their attention to safer regions of space. The Centaurians had tried next, convinced that their mathematical precision could solve what brute force could not. They had studied the zones for decades, mapping every energy reading and gravitational anomaly. When they finally sent in their probe ships, the results were the same. Complete disappearance. No signals, no debris, nothing. The Centaurians had added their own warnings to the galactic databases and moved on. The Rigelians had been the last to attempt it, and they had been the most thorough. They had spent centuries developing new technologies specifically designed to handle the strange conditions inside the void zones. They had created ships with reality anchors, consciousness shields, and temporal stabilizers. None of it had mattered. Their expeditions had met the same fate as all the others. After that, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy peace. The major civilizations had divided up the safe regions of space between them, establishing trade routes and colonies in areas far from the dangerous zones. The void zones had become the ultimate boundary, the final frontier that could not be crossed. Stone read through the files on VZ7, noting the warnings from all 3 major species. The zone was relatively small, only about 2 light-years across, but it was close to human space. Too close, according to some of the older admirals who remembered when humanity had first joined the galactic community. The humans were still considered newcomers by galactic standards. They had only been traveling between the stars for a few hundred years, while the other species had been doing it for millennia. Most of the alien races saw humans as crude and primitive, useful for manual labor and simple tasks, but lacking the sophistication needed for advanced exploration. Stone's door chimed, and Chief Engineer Lisa Park walked in. She was carrying her own copy of the mission briefing, and her expression was just as confused as his. "Tell me this is some kind of joke," she said, dropping into the chair across from his desk. "They want us to fly into a void zone?" "The same void zones that have been killing explorers for 3,000 years? Stone shook his head. "No joke. Admiral Foster signed off on it personally. We're supposed to investigate VZ7 and report back on what we find." "What we find will probably be our own deaths," Park muttered. "The Altarians lost 3 fleets in these things." 3 fleets, David? That's more ships than humanity has in our entire navy." "I know the risks," Stone said, "but the orders are clear. We investigate the zone and see if we can learn anything new about it." Park leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. "Why us? Why now?" "The galaxy has been perfectly happy pretending these zones don't exist for the last 1,000 years. What's changed?" Stone had been wondering the same thing. He pulled up another file on his screen, one that had been classified until just a few days ago. "Resources," he said. "Long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures on the far side of VZ-7. If there's something valuable in there, Command wants to know about it." "And they're willing to risk an entire ship and crew to find out?" "Apparently so." Park stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. "The other species think we're crazy, you know. They call us reckless, unpredictable. They think we don't know when to quit." Stone joined her at the viewport. "Maybe they're right. Maybe that's exactly what we need." 2 hours later, Stone was standing in the ship's main briefing room, addressing his senior staff. Navigator Tom Rivers was there, along with Science Officer Rachel Green and Security Chief Mark Williams. They all had the same expression of concern mixed with curiosity. "I know what you're all thinking," Stone began. "This mission sounds like suicide." The void zones have been considered impassable for 3,000 years. Every major civilization has tried to breach them and failed. Rivers raised his hand. "Captain, with respect, if the Altarians couldn't do it with their advanced technology, what makes Command think we can?" "That's a fair question," Stone replied. "The truth is, they don't know if we can, but they think it's worth trying." Green leaned forward. "What makes us different from the others? Why would we succeed where they failed?" Stone was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. He thought about the conversation he'd had with Admiral Foster just before receiving the mission orders. The Admiral had said something that stuck with him. "Because we're human," Stone said finally. "The other species, they're careful, methodical. They study a problem until they understand every variable, every possible outcome. They don't take risks unless they're absolutely certain of success." "And that's bad?" Williams asked. "Not bad," Stone said. "Just different. Humans, we do things differently. We take risks. We try things that probably won't work. We keep pushing forward even when logic says we should stop." Park nodded slowly. "Like when we first left Earth, everyone said interstellar travel was impossible. The distances were too great, the technology too complex. But we tried anyway." "Exactly," Stone said. "And when we made contact with the galactic community, they said we'd never be more than a minor species. Too young, too primitive. But here, we are." Rivers was studying the navigation charts for VZ7. "The energy readings from inside the zone are unlike anything I've seen before. Gravitational distortions, temporal fluctuations, reality distortions. It's like space itself is broken in there, which is exactly why the other species gave up," Green added. "Their sensors told them it was impossible, so they believed it." Stone looked around the room at his crew. "So what do you think? Are we crazy enough to try this?" Williams grinned. "Captain, we're human. Crazy is what we do best." The meeting broke up with everyone understanding their roles. They would depart for VZ-7 in 12 hours, carrying supplies for a month-long mission. Stone hoped it would be enough time to either solve the mystery of the void zones or die trying. The Terra Nova approached VZ-7 at half impulse, every sensor array active and recording. Stone stood on the bridge, watching the viewscreen as space itself seemed to shimmer and twist ahead of them. The void zone looked like a massive bubble of distorted reality, its edges crackling with energy discharges that made no sense according to known physics. "Range to zone boundary, 5,000 kilometers in closing," Rivers reported from the navigation station. His voice was steady, but Stone could see the tension in his shoulders. "All sensor readings are off the charts," Green announced from her science station. "Gravitational fields are fluctuating wildly. Time dilation effects are jumping between normal and extreme levels. It's like the laws of physics are having an argument with themselves in there." Stone nodded, keeping his eyes on the screen. "What do you think, Tom? Can we navigate through that?" Rivers studied his instruments for a long moment. "Honestly, Captain, it should be impossible. The distortions are too random, too chaotic. There's no pattern to follow, no safe path to plot." "Should be impossible," Stone repeated. "But that's what they said about everything else we've done." The ship shuddered slightly as they crossed into the zone's outer edge. Immediately, the instruments went wild. Lights flickered on the bridge as the ship's systems struggled to compensate for the reality distortions around them. "Hull stress is increasing," Park reported from engineering, "but it's within acceptable limits. The ship can handle this, at least for now." Stone felt a strange sensation, like the deck was tilting under his feet even though the gravity remained steady. He gripped the captain's chair tighter and focused on the viewscreen. "Take us deeper, Tom. Nice and slow." Rivers' hands moved over his controls, adjusting their course to avoid the worst of the energy discharges. "Captain, these readings don't make sense. One moment we're in normal space, The next we're in some kind of twisted dimension. It's like reality is broken. Maybe it is, Green said. Or maybe reality here just works differently than we're used to. As they moved deeper into the zone, the distortions grew stronger. The view screen showed impossible sights, stars that appeared to be folding in on themselves, space that curved back on itself in ways that hurt to look at, energy patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human mind could process. Tom, you're from Kansas, right? Stone asked suddenly. Rivers looked confused by the question. Yes, sir. Born and raised. Ever chased tornadoes? All the time as a kid. My father was a storm spotter. Why? Stone pointed at the chaos on the screen. What does this remind you of? Rivers stared at the swirling patterns of distorted space for a moment, then his eyes widened. Storm systems. These aren't random distortions, they're following weather patterns. Chaotic, but still patterns. Exactly. The other species probably saw chaos and gave up. But you've seen chaos before, haven't you? Every storm is chaos, Rivers said, his hands moving more confidently over his controls. But chaos has rules. You just have to learn how to read them. The navigator began plotting a new course, treating the space distortions like atmospheric turbulence instead of impossible barriers. He guided the ship through gaps in the energy storms, riding the currents of twisted space-time like a surfer riding waves. This is insane, Williams muttered from his security station. We're flying through broken reality and treating it like bad weather? Maybe that's exactly what it is, Green said, studying her readings. Maybe the other species tried to fight the distortions instead of working with them. They probably sent in their ships like battering rams, trying to force their way through. While we're dancing with the storm, Park added from engineering. Leave it to humans to try dancing with impossible physics. The ship bucked and rolled as they navigated deeper into the zone. Reality seemed to bend around them, creating visual effects that were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Stone felt his stomach lurch as they passed through what appeared to be a pocket of reverse time, where he could swear he saw the ship moving backward for a few seconds. How much farther to the center? He asked. According to these readings, we should be there now, Rivers replied. But distance doesn't seem to work normally in here. We could be a few kilometers away or a few light years. The instruments can't tell the difference. Then we keep going until we find something or run out of fuel. They flew on through the chaos, with Rivers growing more confident in reading the patterns of distorted space. He began to anticipate the fluctuations, steering the ship through the safest paths like he was navigating a familiar road. The rest of the crew watched in amazement as their navigator treated the impossible conditions like a challenging but manageable flight problem. Contact ahead, Green suddenly announced. It's solid matter, definitely artificial. Captain, there's something in here. Stone leaned forward. On screen, the view screen cleared for a moment, showing them what lay ahead. It was a structure unlike anything in the galactic databases, a massive construct that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. It was clearly artificial, built by some intelligence, but it was old. Very old, my God, Green whispered. Captain, I'm reading technology signatures that are millions of years ahead of anything we know about. This thing is ancient. Any signs of life? None. It appears to be dormant, maybe abandoned. Stone made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Take us closer. If we're going to die in here, we might as well learn something first. As they approached the ancient structure, the space distortions around them began to calm. It was as if the construct was creating a pocket of stable reality in the chaos of the void zone. Rivers was able to bring them to a stable orbit around the massive object. It's beautiful, Park said softly, and impossible. The energy readings suggest it's drawing power directly from the space distortions. It's using the chaos as a power source. More than that, Green added, her voice full of excitement. I think this structure is what's creating the void zone. It's some kind of test, a barrier designed to keep out anyone who can't navigate through chaos. Stone stared at the ancient construct and felt a chill run down his spine. A test. The other species failed the test. But we passed it, Rivers said with a grin. We actually passed it. What's on the other side? Stone asked. Green worked her instruments frantically. Long-range sensors are detecting star systems, Captain. Dozens of them. All rich in exotic matter and energy sources. It's like an entire region of the galaxy that's been sealed away for millions of years. Sealed away from anyone who couldn't pass the test, Williams added. Anyone who couldn't navigate through chaos. Stone looked around at his crew, seeing the same realization in their eyes. They had stumbled onto something enormous, something that would change everything. The void zones weren't barriers to be avoided. They were gateways to be unlocked. Set course for the nearest star system, he ordered. Let's see what our prize looks like. As the Terra Nova passed through the ancient construct and emerged into clear space on the other side, Stone couldn't help but smile. The other species had seen chaos and run away. Humans had seen chaos and learned to dance with it. Now they had the entire galaxy to themselves. The news of humanity's breakthrough spread through the galactic community like wildfire. Within hours of the Terra Nova's first transmission from beyond VZ7, every major civilization was demanding answers. How had the primitive humans accomplished what the greatest minds in the galaxy had declared impossible? Dr. Maria Santos sat in the emergency session of the Galactic Council, representing humanity alongside Ambassador Foster. Around the circular chamber, the finest representatives of 3 millennia of galactic civilization stared at the humans with expressions ranging from disbelief to outright hostility. The Altarian High Counselor Vel spoke first, his crystalline form pulsing with agitated light patterns. This must be some form of deception. The humans cannot have breached the void zones. Our most advanced technology failed to penetrate even the outer layers. Yet our long-range sensors confirm their signals, replied Centaurian Prime Calculator Nex, his mechanical voice carrying notes of confusion. The transmission originated from coordinates that should be unreachable. The probability calculations indicate a success rate of less than 0.0001%. Ambassador Foster smiled calmly. Gentlemen, I assure you this is no deception. Captain. Stone and his crew successfully navigated VZ7 and discovered an entire star system, rich in exotic matter and ancient technology. They are currently exploring 3 additional systems that were previously hidden behind the zone. The Rigelian War Commander Carr leaned forward, his scaled features twisted into a snarl. Impossible. We lost entire fleets attempting to breach those zones. Our ships were equipped with reality anchors, temporal stabilizers, consciousness shields. Nothing worked. Dr. Santos spoke up for the first time. That may have been the problem. You tried to fight the chaos instead of working with it. Our navigator treated the space distortions like weather patterns, not like barriers to be overcome. Weather patterns? Vel's light patterns shifted to what humans had learned indicated contempt. The zones contain fundamental breaks in reality itself. Time flows backward, space folds in on itself, matter exists in multiple states simultaneously. These are not weather patterns. To you, maybe not, Santos replied. But humans evolved. On a world where chaos was the norm. Earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, ice ages. We learned to adapt to unpredictable conditions instead of trying to control them. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For 3,000 years, the galaxy's greatest civilizations had approached the void zones with the same methodical precision that had made them successful in every other endeavor. They had tried to impose order on chaos, to solve the zones like mathematical equations. Humans had simply danced with the chaos instead. Centaurian, Prime Calculator Nex, was the first to break the silence. Request permission to examine human navigation techniques. Our mathematical models require updating to account for this new approach. Denied, Ambassador Foster said firmly. The techniques used are classified under human military protocols. War. Commander Carr's eyes flashed dangerously. You would hoard this knowledge? Keep the galaxy's greatest discovery to yourselves? We're willing to share, Foster replied. Under the proper circumstances, with the right agreements? The political maneuvering began immediately. The Altarians offered technological exchanges, promising to share their advanced energy manipulation techniques in return for access to human navigation methods. The Centaurians proposed joint exploration missions, suggesting that human intuition combined with their mathematical precision could unlock even greater discoveries. The Rigelians made thinly veiled threats, pointing out that humanity's small fleet could not possibly defend the territories they had discovered. Dr. Santos watched the proceedings with growing understanding. These species had dominated the galaxy for millennia through careful calculation and methodical expansion. They had built their civilizations on the principle that every problem could be solved through sufficient analysis and preparation. The concept of embracing uncertainty was literally alien to them. "You still don't understand," she said, interrupting a heated exchange between the Altarian and Rigelian representatives. "This isn't about navigation techniques or mathematical models. It's about fundamental differences in how we think." "Explain," demanded War Commander Kar. Santos stood and walked to the chamber's central display, calling up images from the Terra Nova's mission. When Captain Stone's ship encountered the first reality distortions, his crew's immediate reaction was to adapt, not to understand, not to control, but to adapt. They treated the impossible as merely difficult. The display showed recordings from the ship's bridge as they navigated through the chaos. The alien representatives watched in fascination and horror as the human crew laughed at situations that would have sent their own people into panic. "Your species see chaos as a problem to be solved," Santos continued. "Humans see chaos as a challenge to be met. That's why our navigator could read patterns in what you saw as randomness. He wasn't trying to understand the chaos, he was trying to dance with it." Vel's light patterns shifted to what humans recognized as deep thought. "You suggest that the zones were designed to filter based on psychological adaptation rather than technological capability?" "Exactly. And we found evidence to support that theory." The display changed to show images from the ancient construct the Terra Nova had discovered at the center of VZ7. The massive structure defied easy description, its architecture seeming to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "This construct is millions of years old," Santos explained. "Our analysis suggests it's one of dozens scattered throughout the galaxy, each one creating a void zone around itself. They appear to be testing devices left behind by some ancient civilization." "Testing? For what?" asked Prime Calculator Nex. "For species that have learned to embrace uncertainty instead of fearing it. The zones aren't barriers, they're filters. They separate civilizations that have grown too comfortable with predictability from those that still remember how to adapt." The chamber erupted in heated discussion. The representatives argued over the implications, each species trying to understand how they had failed a test they didn't even know they were taking. War Commander Carr was the first to regain his composure. "If these constructs can be studied, analyzed, we can develop new approaches. The Rigelian science corps can adapt human techniques to our own specifications." "That's where you're wrong," Santos said quietly. "We've tried to teach your species our methods. 3 separate research teams have attempted to replicate human navigation techniques. All have failed." "Failed how?" Vel demanded. "They can't stop thinking like their own species long enough to think like humans. When a Centaurian encounters chaos, his first instinct is to calculate. When an Altarian faces uncertainty, she tries to analyze it into manageable components. When a Rigelian meets the impossible, he looks for ways to conquer it. And when a human encounters chaos?" asked Prime Calculator Nex. Santos smiled. "We ask ourselves how we can use it to our advantage." The session continued for hours, but the outcome was already clear. Humanity had not simply discovered a new technology or navigation technique. They had revealed a fundamental limitation that the galaxy's dominant species had never recognized in themselves. For 3 millennia, these civilizations had grown powerful by mastering order and predictability. They had built their success on careful planning and methodical execution. In doing so, they had lost the ability to truly adapt to genuine uncertainty. Humans, still young and wild by galactic standards, had retained that ability. More than retained it, they had refined it into an art form. As the session finally ended, Dr. Santos overheard War Commander Carr speaking quietly to his aide. Begin preparations for the new expansion protocol. If the humans can navigate these zones, we will find a way to follow them. Santos shook her head. They still didn't understand. They were still thinking like conquerors instead of dancers, but that was fine. While they spent years trying to replicate human techniques, humanity would be exploring the dozens of other void zones scattered throughout the galaxy, unlocking secrets that had been hidden for millions of years. The age of careful galactic civilization was ending. The age of human exploration was just beginning. 6 months after the first breakthrough, the galaxy was in chaos. Not the kind of chaos that humans had learned to dance with, but the messy, political chaos that erupted when the established order suddenly collapsed. Commander Ann Taylor stood on the bridge of the exploration ship New Horizon, watching as another void zone dissolved around them. This was their 15th successful passage, and each one had revealed new wonders. Ancient ruins, technology beyond current understanding, and resources that could power civilizations for millennia. Behind them, a small fleet of alien ships maintained a careful distance. The Centaurians had been following human expeditions for months now, hoping to learn through observation what they couldn't master through study. So far they had lost 3 ships trying to replicate human navigation techniques. Another message from the Regellian fleet, reported Communications Officer Paul Hendricks. War Commander Carr is demanding we share our route calculations, Taylor sighed. Same response as always. We don't use route calculations, we improvise. He's not going to believe that. He's not supposed to. Paul, open a channel to the Centaurian. Observation ships. The main screen flickered to show Prime Calculator Nex, his mechanical features showing signs of stress that hadn't been there 6 months ago. Commander Taylor, we have observed your successful passage through VZ-15. Our analysis? Teams are prepared to begin detailed study of your navigation methods. Calculator Next, we've been through this before. You can't learn our methods by studying them. They don't work that way. Everything can be analyzed and understood given sufficient data. Taylor turned to her navigator, Lieutenant Mike Foster. Mike, explain to the good calculator how you just navigated that zone. Foster shrugged. I felt where the distortions wanted to go and went with them. When space started folding, I folded with it. When time ran backward, I backed up and tried a different approach. You felt the distortions? Nex's voice carried a note of mechanical distress. That is not a quantifiable method. Exactly, Taylor said. Calculator, your people have been trying to solve chaos like a math problem for 6 months. How's that working out? The Centaurian's silence was answer enough. Commander, Foster said quietly, we're getting long-range signals from the next system. It's inhabited. Taylor felt her pulse quicken. They had found ancient ruins and abandoned technology, but never actual living civilizations. Put it through. The signal was weak and distorted, but clearly artificial. As their computers cleaned it up, a voice emerged speaking in a language none of them recognized. But the universal translator quickly adapted. Welcome, Chaos Dancers. We have been waiting. The bridge fell silent. Taylor found her voice first. This is Commander Ann Taylor of the human vessel New Horizon. Who are we speaking to? We are the Wanderers. We are what remains of those who built the tests you have passed. We have been waiting for someone like you to find us. The ancient civilization that built the void zones? Not built, became. The zones are not constructs, Commander. They are us. We learn to exist within chaos itself, to become part of the uncertainty that filters the galaxy. Taylor felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying the void zones are alive? We are saying that life finds a way to exist everywhere, even in the spaces between reality. Your species shows promise, Commander. You dance where others try to. March. Behind them, the alien observation fleets were no doubt recording every word. Taylor could imagine the panic in their command centers as they tried to process the idea that the Void zones themselves were living entities? What do you want? From us? She asked. Nothing we wish to give. The galaxy has grown stagnant under the rule of the careful ones. 3,000 years of slow, methodical expansion has created a civilization that fears its own shadow. You offer something new, which is the willingness to change, to adapt, to become something other than what you were. The other species you travel with, they cling to what they are. They try to impose their nature on the universe instead of allowing the universe to change their nature. On the sensor displays, Taylor could see the Centaurian ships struggling to maintain position as reality distorted around them. Their rigid approaches to navigation were failing even in the relatively calm space near the Void Zone's exit. The careful ones seek to follow you, the Wanderer voice continued. They think they can learn your methods through study and practice. They cannot understand that your methods are not techniques to be learned, but ways of being. Ways of being? Your species was forged in chaos. Your world tested you with ice and fire, earthquake and storm. You learned to bend instead of break, to flow instead of stand firm. The other species learned to build walls against uncertainty. You learned to dance with it. Taylor thought about Earth, about the countless disasters that had shaped human evolution. Volcanic winters that had nearly wiped out the species, ice ages that had forced constant migration, storms that could level cities in hours. Humanity had survived by being adaptable, not by being strong. What happens now? She asked. Now you choose. You can try to teach the others your ways, knowing they will likely fail and possibly destroy themselves in the attempt. Or you can continue forward, accepting that some gaps cannot be bridged. Forward to where? To the deep waters where even chaos becomes uncertain. To the places where reality is not broken but genuinely fluid. To the spaces between thoughts where consciousness itself becomes the only navigation tool. The implications hit Taylor like a physical blow. The void zones had been just the beginning. A simple test to separate species that could adapt from those that could not. Beyond them lay challenges that would require not just acceptance of chaos, but the ability to become chaotic themselves. The other species, can they never follow us? Perhaps? If they learn to let go of what they are and become something new. But that requires a choice they have never been forced to make. Your species made that choice long ago when your world gave you no other option. Taylor looked around her bridge at her crew. They were listening to a conversation about transcending the basic nature of reality itself, and none of them looked particularly worried. Foster was already studying his instruments, eager to try navigating through uncertainty even greater than what they had experienced. Commander, Hendricks reported, the alien fleets are requesting permission to follow us to the next zone. The next zone will test them beyond their limits, the Wanderer warned. Many will not survive the attempt. Taylor made the hardest decision of her career. Patch me through to all ships, human and alien. When the connection was established, she addressed the combined fleet. This is Commander Taylor. We have just received information that the zones ahead are significantly more dangerous than what we've encountered so far. Any ship that wishes to return to safe space should do so now. No shame in that choice. War Commander Carr's voice crackled through the comm. The Rigelian Empire does not retreat from challenges. Neither do the Centaurians, added Prime Calculator Nex. Though his voice carried uncertainty, the Altarian observer ship was silent for a long moment before High Counselor Val spoke. We will observe from a safe distance, Taylor nodded. Understood. All ships prepare for transition to the next zone. Be advised that normal physics may not apply where we're going. As the human ships began moving toward the next void zone, Taylor watched the alien vessels struggle to follow. The Centaurians had modified their ships with human navigation interfaces, but their crews still thought like machines. The Rigelians had added chaos generators to try to simulate the uncertainty their crews needed to practice with, but chaos created artificially was not the same as chaos accepted naturally. Commander, Foster said, the zone ahead is unlike anything we've seen. It's not just space that's distorted, it's causality itself. Effects preceding causes, decisions changing the past, thoughts becoming reality. Can you navigate it? Foster grinned. Probably not. But it'll be interesting. To try. That was the difference, Taylor realized. Her crew was excited by the prospect of navigating impossible conditions. The alien crews behind them were terrified by the same prospect. Take us in, Mike. Let's see how deep the rabbit hole goes. As the human ships disappeared into the next zone, reality bending around them like water around stones, the alien observers watched in amazement and horror. They were witnessing the next step in human evolution, a transformation from a species that could adapt to chaos into something that could become chaos itself. Behind them, emergency sessions were being called in every alien capital. The galaxies. Established powers were finally beginning to understand that humanity wasn't just different from them. Humanity was becoming something entirely new, something that might leave the rest of the galaxy permanently behind. 2 years after the first breakthrough, Captain David Stone was no longer entirely human. At least, that's what the reports from the alien observation posts claimed. He could still walk and talk like any other person, but there was something different about him now, something that made reality bend slightly around his presence. Standing on the bridge of his heavily modified Terra Nova, Stone watched as space folded itself into impossible geometries ahead of them. This was their 37th zone passage, and each one had changed them a little more. His navigator, Tom Rivers, no longer needed instruments to plot their course. He simply felt where they needed to go, and the ship followed, guided by intuition. That had grown beyond normal human understanding. "Status report," Stone said, though he already knew the answer. The connection between crew members had grown so strong that individual thoughts sometimes merged into collective understanding. "We're approaching the consciousness fields," reported Science Officer Rachel Green. Her equipment had long since become obsolete for measuring what they encountered now. She had learned to sense the strange energies directly, her mind adapting to perceive dimensions that had no names in any language. "The Wanderers are welcoming us," added communications. Officer Angela Ward, she no longer used radio equipment to speak with the entities they met. The conversations happened directly, mind to mind, in spaces between thoughts where meaning could exist without words. Behind them, far in normal space, the alien observation fleets maintained their vigil. They had tried to follow the human expeditions deeper into the zones, but the results had been catastrophic. The Regellian Empire had lost 6 ships before War Commander Carr finally accepted that his forces could not survive where humans thrived. The Centaurians had modified their crews with human neural implants, hoping to artificially induce the adaptability they lacked naturally. The experiments had driven most subjects insane. Only the Altarians had found limited success, not by trying to become more human, but by acknowledging their fundamental inability to change. High Counselor Vell had established monitoring stations at the edges of each zone, content to observe and record rather than participate. "Captain," Green said, "we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic News Networks. They want a statement about our latest discoveries." Stone smiled. The galaxy's media had been following their expeditions with a mixture of fascination and terror. Each new discovery seemed to rewrite the basic assumptions about reality itself. "Tell them we're still exploring, that's all they need to know." The truth was far more complex. The human expeditions had discovered that the universe was far stranger and more flexible than anyone had imagined. Reality wasn't fixed, it was fluid. Consciousness could navigate through dimensions that existed only as potential. Time could flow in multiple directions simultaneously. Space could be folded, twisted, and reshaped by will alone. Most importantly, they had learned that the barriers between what was real and what was possible were largely artificial, created by species that had grown too comfortable with predictability. "Contact ahead," Rivers announced. "It's the Deep Thinkers." Stone nodded. The Deep Thinkers were entities they had encountered in the previous zone, beings of pure consciousness that existed in the spaces between rational thought. They had been expecting this meeting. The view screen shimmered and reality restructured itself around them. They were no longer on a ship in space, but standing in a vast library that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Books wrote themselves on shelves that extended into conceptual infinity. A figure approached them, tall and luminous, constantly shifting between different possible forms. It spoke without using words, its meaning appearing directly in their minds. Welcome, changemakers. You have progressed beyond our expectations. We're learning, Stone replied, his voice somehow reaching the entity despite the lack of normal space around them. But we're still human. No, you are what humans are becoming. The galaxy watches your transformation with fear and wonder, not understanding that evolution never stops, it only pauses. Around them, the library showed images of human expeditions across dozens of zones. Each crew had changed, adapted, evolved into something new while retaining their essential humanity. They were becoming beings that could exist comfortably in chaos, that could navigate through uncertainty as easily as walking down a street. The other species, Stone said, they're struggling to follow us. They are struggling to remain unchanged. While entering realms that demand change, it cannot be done. To go where you are going, one must be willing to become something other than what one was. And where exactly are we going? The entity gestured toward a section of the library where the books were writing themselves backward, their words existing before their thoughts. To the source. To the place where the universe dreams itself into existence. Where consciousness and reality are the same thing. Stone felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Is that safe? No, but you knew that when you began this journey, safety is for species that have stopped growing. Captain, Green said, her voice carrying across impossible distances, the Wanderers are sending us coordinates. Not spatial coordinates, but conceptual ones. Directions to something they call the origin point. What's at the origin point? The deep thinker's form shifted to show something that might have been a smile. Everything that could be, but has chosen not to exist yet. The place where potential becomes actual, where thought becomes reality. Stone looked around at his crew. They had come so far from their origins as simple space explorers. They could perceive dimensions that had no names, navigate through concepts instead of coordinates, exist partially. Outside normal reality while still maintaining their humanity. If we go there, he said, will we still be human? You will be what humanity becomes when it stops limiting itself to what it has always been. Back in normal space, the alien fleets received one final transmission from the Terra Nova, Captain. Stone's voice, transmitted across dimensions that shouldn't exist, carried a message that would be debated in alien councils for generations. This is Captain Stone of the human vessel Terra Nova. We are departing normal reality for regions that cannot be mapped or measured by conventional means. We go not as explorers, but as pioneers of what consciousness itself can become. To any species listening, know that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than you have imagined. The barriers you see are not walls, they are invitations to become something greater. Do not try to follow us unless you are prepared to lose everything you think you are and become everything you could be instead. The path ahead requires not courage, but the willingness to embrace transformation itself. We are human, we are change. We are what happens when a species refuses to accept that anything is impossible. The transmission ended, and the Terra Nova vanished from all sensors, departing for realms that existed beyond the concept of location itself. In the monitoring stations, alien scientists recorded the moment when humanity transcended the need for physical existence while somehow remaining recognizably human. They had witnessed the birth of something new, a species that had learned to dance with uncertainty, so well that they had become uncertainty itself. The galaxy's careful civilizations continued their methodical expansion through safe, predictable space, building colonies and trade routes in regions where the laws of physics remained comfortably constant. They had chosen stability over transformation, safety over possibility. Meanwhile, in dimensions that existed between thoughts and in spaces that reality had not yet decided to occupy, human consciousness explored the infinite potential of what could be. They had become the universe's way of dreaming new dreams, of imagining possibilities that had never been considered. And sometimes, when alien scientists detected impossible energy readings or when space itself seemed to laugh at their careful calculations, they knew that somewhere in the chaos between what was real and what was possible, humans were still exploring, still changing, still refusing to accept that any frontier could be final. The age of careful galactic civilization continued, but it was no longer the only game in the universe. Humanity had found a way to play by entirely different rules, rules that they wrote themselves as they danced through dimensions of pure possibility. They had kept advancing when others backed down, and in doing so had discovered that the ultimate frontier was not space, but the infinite potential of consciousness itself to become something more than it had ever been before.